Hey guys, in today's video, I want to do what amounts to a public service message about what you need to do before purchasing property to build a house on. Now, I've done some videos about this before, but this one I'm going to dive deep into one of the big mistakes that I see made when people are buying property to build a custom home on, which is not doing due diligence on the utilities. So, what I'm getting at is checking into and verifying what utilities are available at the property before you buy it, so you know what you're dealing with going in, you know what the cost may be, and you're not putting, kind of a complication on the subsequent builder you're going to hire to do the project. My company is primarily a build on your lot builder. That means, the home behind me that you're seeing is being built on this customer's property that they owned. It's in a subdivision with acreage properties, and it is a great example that I'm going to use of what can happen with some of these issues with utilities on lots. I have dealt with utility issues on the homes that we're building land on numerous times. Really, it happens over and over again for some common reasons. I would say it primarily falls into the you don't know what you don't know category. In other words, for the average person out there looking at land, interested in buying a lot, they don't know what to look for, and that's understandable. I'm going to start with some of the main things to look for when you're buying property, and things that are red flags when it comes to utilities. Keep in mind, you can almost always get utilities to the property, but it is how much does it cost? What is involved with doing it? Is it something that you need to really figure out before you start building? And in most cases, I'm going to say that is the case, because it can trip up the builder in the building process, as kind of happened with this house here. So the first thing I will talk about is the type of property you can buy. If you are going into what I will call a platted subdivision, that is a subdivision in a suburb or a city where a land developer has gone in, bought a piece of land, done a layout, with roads and lots and all that, got it approved through whatever municipality it needed to get it approved through, and then developed it. We see these going all the time. Tractors are in there, cutting in the roads, creating the lots. The developer then sends in the utility companies to get utilities at every lot in the subdivision. What the developer first does is a layout of the subdivision, and then they create what they call a survey plat, P-L-A-T. So a survey plat is when you see a subdivision laid out on paper, and it's got all the boundary lines. It shows the easements, it shows everything, because it is a true survey. It's not just a sales flyer with colored lots. It is the actual survey plat, and that is what we call a platted subdivision. Now, the developer's job is to make sure utilities are going to every lot in the platted subdivision. So when you are looking at a survey plat for a subdivision, and you look at the numbers and letters on the lots, what you are seeing are the legal addresses of the lots. Generally speaking, subdivisions are going to have blocks, and they are going to have lot numbers. So you will see things like Block A or Block 1, Lot 1, Lot 2, Lot 3. When you're looking at these platted subdivisions, and you're looking at the legal address of the lot, what you want to see is if there is a number for the lot and an R after it. R as in whatever the military alphabet is for that. Roy, Robert, not sure. Ray gun. But you want to look and see, does it say lot 3R block 2? Because if it has that R, it means it was replatted. What does that mean, replatting? Well, people use the term subdividing, kind of that. So, for example, this subdivision I'm in has large acreage lots. Still a platted subdivision, but the lots are anywhere from 15 to 50 acres in size. Well, we had an interesting thing happen with this house. This is our Fort Worth build, as I call it. I've been documenting the progress of it. And I think this property we're on is something like 15 to 20 acres. And we assumed, although I never really assume, I try to get a jump on utilities, but we assumed it had power. Why did we assume that? Well, because we've got a gigantic green box at one corner that is a transfer switch box. We also have a smaller transformer on the other corner. Transformers are what take the big power lines and step it down to be able to run it to a house. But I still did what I always do, which is the very first thing I do on these kind of lots is to call the power company and try to find out what is the situation with the power. Well, this was a great example of a platted subdivision that, as it turned out, even though we had big utility boxes on each corner of the front of our property, we did not have electricity to it. Even worse, they were claiming there was no way to get electricity to it without running from way down the street through somebody else's yard, having to create easements and all these kind of things. So, fun little factoid. The Fort Worth build, big house, we built about 35% of this on a Harbor Freight generator that I went and bought. Actually, the homeowner paid for, but hey, the thing still runs. I need to do a commercial for Harbor Freight and their generators. But that was because we didn't have power at the lot, and the process of getting power here and dealing with the power company we had to deal with was excruciatingly slow and frustrating. So as it turns out, what had happened with this property is that it was originally a bigger property. The property we are building on was replatted. I believe the house behind me, if we can see it, owned all of the property that our Fort Worth build is. Somebody had come in after the subdivision was done. The developer had done what the developer was obligated to do. They had provided utilities to this one big lot. But then later, somebody subdivided it or replatted it into two smaller lots. So this is where the replatting process can burn somebody in a platted subdivision when it comes to utilities. The developer has gone in and said, okay, we've got 50 lots in here. Let's just say they're 2-acre lots. They have provided electricity to each property. But then later, with the approval of the subdivision and everything, a property gets replatted from a 2-acre lot to from a 2-acre lot to 2 1-acre lots. Well, now one of those 1-acre lots isn't going to have utilities to it. So that's what happened here. First, we had to discover that. I didn't have the actual survey. I had site plans and things like that. And only later, when I got the actual survey, did I see the R next to it. So this was a replat lot. Now, let me show you something which is just crazy. When I say we assumed certain things, if you can see behind me, gigantic green electric box here. This is the switch box. Down on the other side is a regular transformer. So the obvious assumption was, well, we've got electricity to the property and when we first looked at it, but after making the calls and figuring it out, there was no electricity available. And like I said, it was going to have to come from down the road somewhere because this box was full. Just, a kind of a crazy situation. We needed to start building, so we bought generators and started building the house off generators. Then we had to come in and work with the power company to set up an easement that ran down this part of the fence property to create a dedicated easement for the electric company and an easement for a transformer for our property. So now, way back at that corner is that big switch box I was talking about. And all the way down here, I think we're 150 feet or something like that, is the transformer. So we had to survey this out, dedicate an easement to be able to run a line down here to set a transformer, which then powers our house and party barn, as you can see behind me. And to do all that took months. Now, we are dealing with one of the companies that owns the power lines out in this part of Texas. In Texas, you have an interesting situation. I don't know how it is everywhere, but you will have sections, big sections that are owned by a company called Encore that owns essentially all the infrastructure. You don't actually make your payments to them for electricity, but they own all the lines and we deal with them on this stuff. And they are like dealing with Congress to get things done. If it wasn't for this homeowner having a relative that worked at the company that was able to harass somebody else and get them to get with us, I don't know how much longer this would have taken. As it was, it took a long time, and we finally were able to get our power. This homeowner bought a property that he assumed had electricity to it. Now, this neighborhood does not have water and sewer. Every home has to have a private water well and a septic system. So they didn't even have to worry about those particular utilities, but I have dealt with that before too, where we've got a replatted property and none of those utilities are available. And that can be a real problem. So again, that's part of this video, is to help explain. If you are looking in a platted subdivision, look at a survey. Get a survey. Obviously you want to look at easements and everything like that, but you also want to know, was it a replatted lot? Because if it was, it probably doesn't have the utilities available. So that's what we dealt with out here. More common with acreage properties because they're so big. You know, hey, if this was a 50-acre lot, no big deal to cut it into 2 properties. That's why you're generally, if you're going into a 1/4-acre lot subdivision, you're generally not going to see that happen. You are usually safe. Now, the next type of property you could buy would be really just truly a subdivided property. You see it all the time. People own 100 acres and they've gone out and they've, divided up lots and they've surveyed them out, had them titled that way and sold them off. Maybe you bought a 1-acre lot, maybe you bought a 5-acre lot, whatever it is. Properties like that generally are not going to have utilities available at the lot. You almost always are going to have to call the utility companies and verify what's available there, especially electricity. So one of the probably biggest assumptions I've seen made by people buying properties is I will ask them, do you have the utilities at your lot, at your property? And they will say, yeah, electric's there, water's there, whatever it is. Only later when we're starting the project do I discover that, okay, electricity isn't there. They were talking about the fact that they saw transformers or maybe overhead power lines running down the street. Their neighbor had water, so they assumed they did. And that's where making those assumptions really can cause a problem later, because what happens is you find out you've got to do all this work that, number one, could delay the construction, and number two, cost a lot more than you expected. My homeowner paid a pretty penny just to do this. He basically had to pay to have this electric brought onto this property. I've had this numerous times, and I've had some homeowners quite honestly get very frustrated, almost, they're not lashing out at me, but I kind of get some of that. And the reality was, it doesn't have anything to do with the builder. Our contracts state we hook up the utilities from the house to the utilities available at the lot, meaning the utilities need to be at the property. It's when people are surprised later and find out they need to spend $10,000, $15,000 to bring all these utilities to the lot that they thought were there, that's frustrating to them. Understandably, nobody likes financial surprises or delays or both. So that's the thing when people are looking at property, I see a lot or just assumptions made. Hey, there's a power line out there. Of course I have power. You have power lines. Doesn't mean there's a transformer. Doesn't mean we know how it's getting to the property, especially when it's hundreds of feet away. Same with city utilities. Here's one if you're looking at city lots where the neighborhood has water and sewer. I've had this happen. Subdivided acreage lot in the city. Now it does not have the water and sewer taps for the lot. The taps are, let's say we've got a main water line running down the street. There's a smaller line coming off of it that the meter gets set on and goes to the house. Well, that tap line coming off the main line under the road isn't there, because once upon a time this was an acreage property. I had this happen not that long ago. You can have some situations where the city will do those taps for you, and they're relatively inexpensive. Hey, we do a water tap for $1,500 or whatever it is. That's great when the city does it. When the city doesn't do it, it's a bit of a mess. You have to hire a utility contractor. It's not a regular plumber. It is a utility contractor. The same contractors that are doing these subdivisions have to come in. They have to tap the water lines, tap the sewer line, all these kind of things that, number one, it's very expensive. You think about these utility contractors, they're doing big projects. If they need to do a one-off thing for you like that, they will charge a ton. I've seen these water tap, quotes be 20 grand. So I've had homeowners in this situation. They didn't know they didn't have a water tap. They didn't know they didn't have a sewer tap. And then they're pretty frustrated when they find out they've got to spend 15, 20 grand to tap into it. I have probably done for free thousands and thousands of dollars of work getting people's utilities to their property, this one included. Because the reality is they don't know how to do it. I get that. And so I have no problem helping. It's in my interest anyways. I want to get the job going. But the fact is, I've often spent a lot of time dealing with utility companies who can be very challenging to deal with because they aren't fast at anything they do, at trying to get utilities to a property that, in a perfect world, the homeowners would have done this due diligence on the front end and determined that, okay, I need to get electric to my property. I need to get water to my property. And again, the other issue with this can just be flat out, it can cause delays. It can cause issues when you're trying to build the home. I've had these cases where we're already at the point that the plumbers have done the ground plumbing, the rough plumbing and the foundation forms. We need to get water in those pipes, pass our inspections, and we still don't have that water tap and that water meter. And so that's causing problems with just trying to construct the home. Again, this home built a lot of it on generator. So these are some examples of what can happen with utilities. So what do you need to do when you are looking at a property? The most important thing you can do on the front end is get a copy of the survey. So again, if you are in a platted subdivision, you want to get a copy of it to make sure that lot wasn't a replatted lot. And if it is just a piece of property that might have been subdivided by somebody, you want to get a copy of it to just have that, know what's going on with it. But the second thing you always want to do is follow up with the utility companies. You always need electric at the lot. So at a minimum, you have to have electricity. And that's one of the most important things on the front end you need to find out about is, do we have electricity available at the lot? What you need to do is call the electrical provider and find out. They have departments called engineering or called design. And the best thing you can do is have them come out and meet you at the property, because they may need to look around. I've seen some of these subdivisions with overhead power lines, and they'll go, okay, we don't have any transformers here. We need to put one on this pole. We'll come down from this pole and run underground to the house, things like that. You need to work out before you get started with your builder to make sure the utilities are available at the lot, and so you aren't causing any delays, and also so you know what you're spending. You could be looking at a lot that's right on the edge of what you want to pay for, and then you find out you're going to spend another $25 to bring in utilities or more, and that may blow that lot out of the water. The thing I've seen is you can't really rely on sellers or realtors. They will often say, yeah, utilities are available. And like I said, okay, the power lines may be running in front of the house on the power pole. That doesn't mean they're actually at the property itself. Same with water, same with sewer. So these are the kind of things you need to verify before you make the purchase. If you're somebody that has already purchased the land and you didn't really do that, do it now. Do it before you get the builder involved. Because there again, I have had many a job where I ended up being the one that essentially facilitated and handled the utility companies to get utilities to the site, when my scope of work should have been just hooking up to utilities that were already at the site. So, it's just something that you want to do your due diligence on. That's why I joked about this being a public service announcement, because I understand you don't know what you don't know. You look at a property, you see power lines out front, everything looks great, you don't know any better, and you buy it. It's only later you find out you have to spend all this time and money to actually get the utilities to the property. So you want to do your due diligence on the front end. Make sure to call the utility companies, verify what's available there. Anytime you're ever dealing with something that has been subdivided or replatted, especially when it's in the city, you definitely want to go down to the city, talk with their engineering department, their public works department, because you may really have that case where you do need to tap the water line, you do need to do a sewer tap, and that's kind of a big deal. And if it's not available at the lot, you need to know going in what's involved with that. Beyond the cost, it can take a while to get that done. And so, again, I've been in all of these situations at different phases. I've had the water tap situation, the sewer, the electricity, all of it. And as I said with this house, we built, 30-40% of it on a generator. So in a perfect world, you want to be able to start the home, have all the utilities there to hook up to, and that will help the process go faster. So in all seriousness, I hope this video was helpful for anybody. If it helps one person out there figure out either what utilities are or are not available before they buy the lot, or even somebody who already owns the property but hasn't hired the builder yet to figure out what is there and to get it in place before you start with the house building, I'm gonna have done my job. So hopefully this video was helpful for somebody. Appreciate you guys watching. See you in the next one.